let's turn it to you and walk us through what the future demand looks like.
So good morning to all of you. And thank you, Tim, and also want to thank you, Steve, for really beautifully setting the context for our discussion that we will now have on student demand for entry into the CSU in relationship to the capacity to accommodate our respective students. So as you well know, and you've heard me state time and time again, that there are three goals associated with the Graduation Initiative 2025. The first is to dramatically increase the number of students that are able to get to degrees faster by virtue of looking at increases in our 4- and 6-year rates for freshmen and 2- and 4-year rates for transfer students. Secondly, our goal is to do away with or eliminate equity gaps between our Pell-eligible students and their peers and between underrepresented minority students and their peers. And then the third goal that we mentioned, but we don't really talk in depth, is to meet California's future workforce needs. And to be quite frank, today's conversation will focus in on that third goal. And what I mean by that is that we continue to hear that California faces a looming degree drought. And PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California, has set the context for us in understanding what that really means, and that by the year 2030, there's a need for 1.1 million more baccalaureate degree holders to fill workforce needs. And what I hope to demonstrate today is, through this forecast of our enrollment demand, is that the pool of CSU eligible applicants will be available in the foreseeable future to enable the CSU to actually meet its share of the projected degree drought. However, and this is not going to be new news to some of you, because some of you have been very clear about the point that I'm about to make next, and that is to achieve this CSU goal, that we will not only need to improve graduation rates, but we also have to sustain enrollment growth. That it cannot be just one end of the spectrum that we place all of our focus on. There's got to be equal focus on the front end, on the access side. And it's got to be authentic access. And what we define as authentic access is sustained funding to facilitate student progression through to completion. Let me share with you why this is also important. Let's take a look at the trends that we have seen and forecast in California's high school graduates. This information is based on the official high school data from the California Department of Education in recent years, as well as the future student projections from the California Department of Finance. So on this slide are the numbers of high school graduates who will complete the A through G pattern of college preparatory courses for CSU or UC admission. In 2017, it's important to note that half of all California public high school graduates completed the A through G pattern of courses. And if we are to assume steady, continued progress, which is what we have seen over the past decade, California will continue to graduate more than 200,000 high school students each year who have completed the A through G course pattern. This amount will peak at over 240,000 students. It's important to recognize, however, that not all students who complete A through G immediately attend a CSU or a UC campus. Many students enroll in a community college or attend a private or out-of-state college. But it's important to at least see the context for what lies ahead for us with the number of new freshmen that we can have at our doors. So on this slide, you see the number of California public high school graduates completing A through G. You also see the number of new CSU freshmen graduating from public high schools. And lastly, what you see is the total number of new CSU freshmen from 2016, 2017 through 2026, 2027. So if we use the previous completion rate trend of A through G courses, and we assume that the CSU's share of those students would remain fairly constant, we can project that 8,000 to 9,000 more freshmen will enroll in fall 2026 than enrolled in fall 2018. This is critical for meeting our state's workforce needs and continuing to serve California. However, without additional investment, campuses will be faced with capacity issues, from instructional to physical, that could threaten authentic access for entering and continuing students. So as noted, we will see continued increases in the number of students completing the A through G patterns of courses. However, it's important for us to all understand that, and we're hearing it directly from the campuses, that this growth will not be uniform throughout the state. On screen, you see several of the primary regions in our state, with the number of students annually completing A through G courses this year, along with the projected numbers annually by 2027. For example, the number of eligible graduates in the Inland Empire and the Central Valley is projected to continue increasing, while in the LA Basin, the number of students continue to increase, and then they will begin to decline. Even with that eventual slight decline in the LA Basin, the demand in the greater Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino region will far exceed the capacity available at the CSU campuses within that respective region. We expect to see increases in the number of students completing A through G courses in all regions, except for Northern Coastal California and Alpine Mono Inyo. What this data, I hope, illustrates to us is the importance of including regionalization into our discussions. Regionalization relative to capacity, as well as resource planning. So that's looking at new freshmen. Let's switch over now and look at transfer students. In addition to anticipated growth in the number of high school graduates coming to us as freshmen, we also anticipate seeing continued increase in transfer students who pursue an associate degree for transfer, also known as ADT. As a reminder, just so that we're all on the same page, that ADTs include a guarantee for admission to the CSU, though not to a particular campus or a program, but for community college students who complete one of the 42 degree pathways. While the California Community College system is unable to provide detailed projections to us of annual ADT trends, their strategic plan calls for increasing transfer to the CSU and UC by 35% by mid-2022. Additionally, to their credit, their funding model provides performance-based funding for increased ADT completion, and also community colleges are continuing to phase out local associate degrees in favor of ADTs. So combined, this allows us to project with a fair degree of confidence an increase in the number of ADT degrees and correspondingly an increase in the CSU share of these ADT recipients. The projected CSU share is indicated on this slide by the yellow line, increasing from around 26,000 students holding ADTs this fall to over 46,000 students by fall 2025. This slide, I think, is the most compelling of all. And it allows us to really take a snapshot of if we are to achieve the goal that is not only prescribed by PPIC, but most importantly, for us to be responsive to the workforce needs of California, here's where we stand. So if you look at the first column that says steady state, this is implying that if we were to do nothing at this point, if we wouldn't have Graduation Initiative 2025, if we would not expect any enrollment growth whatsoever, that if we just stayed the course, that we would graduate 1,397,619 students. That's our projection by 2030, and PPIC's projection is fairly close. Let's look at the next block. The next block shows that this is with our effort on Graduation Initiative, but not with any type of enrollment growth. That if we just stayed the course and continued to work as aggressively as we have been working, that we could expect to see 1,626,317 graduates, which is a difference of about 228,000 students if we were to do nothing on both sides. Now, I have to admit that approximately 230,000 CSU baccalaureate graduates, this is really great news for CSU, but the question is, does it go far enough? And if you look at the third block and understanding that for us, the share that we would need to graduate in order for us, for California to meet our goals by 2030 is about 500,000 more students. And so with that, it's only by increasing access, and that's what that third block shows, equivalent to about a 3 to 5% in annual growth in full-time students, can the CSU produce about 481,000 graduates by 2030 needed to power California's future. Yes, sir.
You say 3 to 5%.
Annually, correct. Correct, annually. So, as you've heard, the projections of CSU eligible high school graduates and community college students earning ADTs demonstrate very clearly that the pool of eligible students, they do exist, and they will continue to exist. The population of students at our doors will not stop anytime soon, and that's good. But the reality is that it's going to be really important for us to be able to answer the question of how do we, as a university, increase our enrollment capacity to serve these additional students. And I'm hoping that by virtue of the meetings that we're having and conversations we're having today, that we will be able to come to some solutions. So let's wrap things up. Here's what we know in terms of this presentation, the takeaways. That the number of high school graduates completing A through G courses will continue to increase, although consideration for regional differences will be necessary, and we have to have that conversation. Secondly, the number of students completing an ADT at a California community college will continue to increase, and the share that seek to transfer the CSU will increase as well. And lastly, and this is a point I haven't made yet, but it's important for us to give consideration to this, and that is we will continue to see demographic changes, student demographic changes, and greater ethnic and racial diversity of students seeking admission into the CSU, and particularly in those regions in which we anticipate greater numbers of prospective students. So we find ourselves, I think, at a watershed moment for CSU. Graduation Initiative 2025, our campuses are acting, I know, as innovatively as they can and focusing on improving student success and increasing the completion outcomes of our students. However, if we really are to meet this third objective, and that's powering California's workforce, additional funding from the state is necessary to meet the student demand and to meet California's future workforce needs. Enrollment growth, in my mind, is best achieved and accommodated through predictable funding allocations over a period of years, reflecting a shared commitment by the university and by the state of California. I'll stop at this point. Questions, comments, or maybe, yes? Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of whether or not we are giving consideration to the private universities within the state and the role that they play relative to the increased demand, as well as looking at online education modeling that we see at Arizona State University. I can say to you that we have begun looking at that. Certainly we do a better job in really looking at where the private institutions, what their role will be in terms of the large number, the 1.1 million, and how we slice it to make sure that everyone's clear about who's responsible for meeting this growing demand. But we are beginning now to look even more carefully at the business model that lies underneath successful online programs such as that at Arizona State and other campuses. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would also say as a reminder that California has always had, as do most states, a three-legged stool, which is excellence in academics and research, access, but also affordability. So the question we have to interrogate, I think, is not simply about the access point, but also how do we sustain the excellence in academics and research? Mm-hmm. How do we sustain affordability when the public is demanding a greater return on investment, especially in light of the changing demographics that you talk about, which creates an intersectionality we've got to be able to talk about and interrogate as well. It's not just an access question for me. It has to involve all three.
No, I agree with you 100%, and that, you know, at I probably should have stated at the very beginning that there are some basic assumptions, and that the largest assumption that I make in providing this presentation is that quality is at the core of everything, and that it is in no way impacted negatively by virtue of all the work that we have to get done, both on the success and the access side. However, we know clearly that if, for instance, the redirection policy that I know is all too familiar with to all of us, that what may lie ahead is that there's the expectation that some of our campuses will continue to admit more students because they will be redirected, the first-time full-time freshmen, but without the actual funding to go along with it. And so that's where capacity begins to be of a grave concern, because it really is important to have that funding so that we don't see our overall capacity continuing to erode, especially that which lies within the learning environment itself. Yes, sir.
After having heard the two presentations and seen the charts and the numbers, I think it's very clear, quite clear to me that the state will not be able to fund the increase that they expect us to deliver. Many of our campuses are landlocked. Many are crowded with buildings. We will not get the extra money. In light of our deferred maintenance cost, we will not get enough money to build the amount of capacity that we need on campuses. So I think the key to actually achieve the goals that you presented vis-a-vis the funding prospects that Steve Rellier has presented, we will have to fill the voids that exist, that we have right now. And I guess this will come up in the discussion at 11 o'clock. I'm willing to speak more to this. When it comes to that, we got to fill the voids. We got to fill the capacity that is underutilized currently. And I mean specifically the Fridays, Friday afternoons, Saturdays, summers, winters. Our campuses are fully utilized during the fall and spring semester. We are packed to the brim. We're exploding laboratories, classes are overflowing, but there's so many days in the week and so many weeks in the years where the campuses are completely underutilized. And I think in the absence of funding for new buildings, for more land, for bigger classrooms and labs, we have to see how we can fill these empty spaces, and not only virtually with online campuses, but literally the facilities we do have, that we utilize them better. And I'm looking forward to that discussion at 11 o'clock when I can present further ideas that I have on that.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to, oh, sorry. Sorry.
And how our K-12 population looks now?
So I know that there is a tremendous growth in the Latinx students in particular. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can get those numbers to share with you. And certainly within the respective regions where I shared that there would be differences in the growth. We know that certainly in the LA region, that number continues to escalate, the number of Latinx students. And the number of black students is not growing as much, but the reality is that the spike in Latinx students is very dramatic. Okay.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for everybody asking the questions. I think some of the discussion topics that we're starting to get anxious to have will be help shaped and cultured a bit by Russ Gould's comments. So it's about 10 minutes to the hour. Why don't we take a 20-minute recess? Restroom is out to the hall to the right and also one off of the patio. There's coffee and refreshments in the back, and we'll reconvene at 10 after the hour. Thank you.